Ever wondered what those 3-digit numbers that pop up when something goes wrong on a website are? Those are HTTP status codes. You see, every time you click a link or hit enter after typing a web address, you're making an HTTP request. That's your web browser asking a server somewhere in the world to send it a web page. But before the server sends anything back, it first sends a status code. This is a 3-digit number that tells your browser whether the request was successful or if there were any issues. These HTTP status codes are a crucial part of how the internet works. They're like a secret language spoken between your browser, the client, and the server, carrying key information about the success or failure of your request. For web developers, understanding these codes is essential for diagnosing and troubleshooting issues. Now, there are 5 broad categories of HTTP status codes, each represented by the first digit. Let's briefly touch on them. First off, we have the 1XX status codes. These are informational codes. They mean the server received the request and the client can continue with the process. Next are the 2XX status codes, which represent success. If you see a 200 status code, for example, your request was successful. Then we have the 3XX status codes. These are redirection codes, which mean the requested resource has been moved and your browser needs to go somewhere else to find it. The 4XX status codes represent client errors. These codes mean there's something wrong with the request you sent. For instance, a 404 error means the server couldn't find what you were looking for. Finally, we have the 5XXX status codes, which indicate server errors. When you see these codes, it means something went wrong on the server's end. So, HTTP status codes are more than just numbers. They're a language of their own, communicating important information between the client and the server. Let's start with the first 2 categories of HTTP status codes, 1XX and 2XX. When you're navigating the world of HTTP status codes, it's like learning a new language. But don't worry, it's not as complicated as it may seem at first glance. To begin, we have the 1XX status codes, also known as informational codes. They're like the server saying, "Hey, I got your request, just give me a moment to process it." An example of a 1XX status code is 100 continue. This code means the server has received the initial part of your request and is telling you to go ahead and send the rest. It's like a green light at a traffic signal, indicating that it's safe to proceed. Moving on, we have the 2XX status codes. These are the success codes. They're the server's way of saying, "All good, I've successfully processed your request." If you're a web developer, these are the codes you want to see. Now, moving on to the 3XX category, these are redirection status codes. Essentially, they tell the client that they need to take additional action to complete the request. This is often the case when a web page or resource has moved to a different location. Let's delve into some examples. The code 301, known as moved permanently, is used when the requested resource has been assigned a new permanent URL. It's like when a shop moves to a new location, and all future requests should be directed to this new address. Next up, we have the 302 status code, also known as found or moved temporarily. This is similar to 301, but in this case, the move isn't permanent. It's like a shop temporarily relocating while renovations are taking place. The original location still exists, and you'll be redirected back there eventually. Lastly, we have the 304 status code, not modified. This is used when the client has a cached copy of the requested resource, and the server informs the client that their copy is still valid. It's like checking if the shop has new stock, but everything is still the same as your last visit. So when you see a 3XX status code, it means your request is being redirected somewhere else. Understanding these codes can help streamline your web development process, making your digital world a little less confusing. The last 2 categories of HTTP status codes, 4XX and 5XX, represent client errors and server errors respectively. Let's dive into these critical categories, starting with 4XX status codes. These codes indicate that something has gone wrong on the client's end. We'll begin with 400 bad request. This status code means that the server couldn't understand the request due to invalid syntax or missing information. Think of it as trying to read a book that's missing several pages. You can't comprehend the full story because crucial information is missing. Next up is 401 unauthorized. This status code means that the request requires user authentication. It's like trying to enter a VIP lounge without the necessary credentials. Without the right pass, you're not getting in. Then we have 403 forbidden. This one is a bit tricky. The server understood the request but refuses to authorize access. Imagine trying to enter a private event, you know where it is, you see the door, but you're just not allowed in. Lastly, in the 4XX category, we have 404 not found. This is a status code we've all probably seen at some point. It simply means the requested resource could not be found on the server. Picture this as going to a library, asking for a book, but the librarian tells you it's not in their collection. Now let's move on to the 5XX status codes. These codes indicate that something has gone wrong on the server's end. First up, 500 internal server error. This is a generic error message indicating that the server encountered an unexpected condition that prevented it from fulfilling the request. Imagine a well-oiled machine suddenly encountering a mysterious glitch, causing it to stop working. Then there's 502 bad gateway. The server received an invalid response from an upstream server while trying to fulfill the request. Picture this as a courier trying to deliver a package, but the destination address is incorrect. Finally, we have 503 service unavailable. This code indicates that the server is currently unable to handle the request due to temporary overload or maintenance. It's like trying to enter a shop that's temporarily closed for restocking or refurbishment. These codes indicate that something has gone wrong with your request, either on your end or the server's end. Understanding these status codes is a key part of building and maintaining robust and reliable web services. Now that we've decoded the meaning behind these HTTP status codes, let's quickly recap what we've learned. Diving into the world of HTTP status codes, we started with the 1XX informational codes. These are provisional responses that tell us the server has received the request and the client should continue with the rest of the request. An example we discussed was the 100 continue code. Moving on to the 2XX success codes, we learned that these show a successful HTTP request. The codes in this range, such as 200 OK and 201 created, are a clear indication that all is well and the requested operation was successful. We then delved into the 3XX redirection codes, which inform us that the requested resource has been moved to a new URL. We took a look at 301 moved permanently and 302 found, among others. The 4XX client error codes, like 400 bad request and 404 not found, indicate that the client has made a mistake. These codes are often the result of a typo in the URL or an attempt to access a resource that simply doesn't exist. Finally, the 5XX server error codes, such as 500 internal server error and 503 service unavailable, signify that the server has encountered an issue fulfilling the request. These are the codes that no one wants to see, as they usually require a deep dive into the server to fix. In essence, HTTP status codes are a language of their own, a way for servers and clients to communicate. They provide vital information about the status of requests, helping us understand what's going on behind the scenes of our web applications. Remember, understanding these HTTP status codes is a key aspect of web development, helping you diagnose and troubleshoot issues with ease. Happy coding!